Hello everyone, welcome back to another video of John Swallow's YouTube channel. And then again, it's such a pleasure to learn from a former Attorney General of the state of Utah about all of the regulations when it comes to owning certain types of property. So today we're going to talk about gun control. So I know that Utah is one of those states that do allow possession of guns under certain circumstances with certain licenses to carry. What are some of those regulations?
Well, the whole concept of gun control is very controversial in the United States, and I totally understand how people who are reasonable can have different opinions on the topic. Certainly no one is in favor of the catastrophic mass shootings that we've seen lately that are just seem like one is happening every 2 or 3 weeks in our country. It's a terrible thing. It's a tragedy for anyone who's been injured by a gun. I served in the legislature for several years in my home state, and I was on a committee that dealt with the issue of gun control. And I heard a 17-year-old boy come and actually testify before our committee and say, listen, if you give me $500 and 90 minutes, I can come back here right to this committee and give you any kind of weapon you ask me to get, basically essentially saying that no law could stop him from getting his hands on a gun. And that's a very interesting thing as we think about gun control and we think about safety and we think about the Second Amendment to our Constitution, which is very important and so important that's in our Constitution. We have to be very careful as we live through these terrible tragedies not to overreact and blame guns per se with the violence that's happening in our society.
Now, I know that there's quite a bit of violence and we see crime in the race, and that's why a lot of people think that they should actually own a gun. But what are some other ways that you would say our government could regulate better who gets an access on a certain type of weapon?
That's a policy issue that legislatures who are comprised of people who are elected by the people have to really debate and try to figure out, because at the end of the day, it seems like there is no correct answer on how to stop gun violence. The propensity of a person to wreak havoc on a society or to commit an act of terrorism, which I believe a mass shooting is in many cases, really is within the heart of the individual who is causing that problem. And so it becomes very difficult for society to say, this is the person who cannot own or carry a weapon. So we've done the best job we can as legislatures across the country to synthesize the information and to say, well, if you're a certain age or less, you shouldn't own or have access to a weapon. If you've been convicted of a violent misdemeanor dealing with domestic violence, you shouldn't own or possess a certain type of a weapon. If you've been convicted of a felony, you shouldn't be able to own or control a weapon. Those are some hard, bright lines that we've, as a society, decided through our legislatures would lawfully restrict the right to keep and bear arms, which is a constitutionally protected right under the Second Amendment of our Constitution. But beyond that, it becomes very difficult because essentially, without a conviction, you are infringing upon a right that people may argue you don't have a basis to infringe upon, because you have denied due process to a person who has not been convicted of a crime, who hasn't been found to be guilty of a wrongdoing serious enough to prevent them from owning a weapon. And so you really get into what's called a slippery slope legally when you start to enact legislation preventing a person with a certain propensity in their life from owning a weapon when they haven't gone through the due process, which is a guarantee in our constitutional form of government. So it's a very, very difficult problem to deal with legislatively. And when we react in this kind of microwave society where we form opinions based on sound bites, we sometimes oversimplify a solution that is so important to us as Americans, that we safeguard the right to defend ourselves, to defend our property, the right to hunt outdoors with our children, which requires a gun in many cases. And we risk overreacting to the few who are causing the terrible tragedies that we see happening throughout our country. And it becomes a very difficult debate in a very difficult solution for real people in real legislatures who are entrusted by people to protect them and keep them safe, as you balance the need for protection with the most priceless possession we all have, and that is our liberty.
Exactly. And I feel like that's the position of quite a bit of people when it comes to owning a gun the right way, of course, which is to protect themselves, to protect their families, or even for recreational purposes, as you mentioned before. What's the right way that you should be owning a gun? What is the right procedure that you should follow so you make sure that you are according to every single rule of the legislature?
Right. Again, gun control happens predominantly on a case-by-case, a state-by-state basis, although there are federal laws, gun laws, that pertain to all of us who live in the United States of America. One thing that we can enforce is that when people do own a weapon, a gun, a handgun or a rifle, that they take due care to protect the people who are in their home. They have a gun safe. I have weapons and I have a gun safe, and I keep that locked, so I don't have my guns laying around. I try to separate my ammunition from my weapon. I try to take good care. Some jurisdictions may institute trigger locks that they require to be placed on weapons, and again, that is really up to each individual state and every form of government to decide what type of rules they'll have. And what the citizens need to do is do everything they can to obey those laws. And if someone is negligent in where they're storing or handling a weapon, then there are repercussions there. They can be civilly sued, or they can actually be criminally prosecuted if they are not careful in how they own and manage the weapons that they do own. And those are some things that we can do better as citizens, and that is safeguard the way we handle our weapons so that we're protecting children, for example, and young people from access to weapons.
Then again, thank you so much, John, and thank you to our audience. So it's really important to notice that whenever you do have a gun, if you feel that you want to own a gun, make sure that you take care of it and that you keep it safe in a place that it's not going to harm anyone that you're not intending to. Thank you so much again, John. And thank you to our audience. We're going to see you in the next video. Bye-bye.